This is 8-Bit and welcome to my Banjo-Kazooie TAS Glitch Exhibition Showcase. So a little bit about what this is. The game has come a really long way since the published TAS was made, and I wanted to make something that would show off what's been happening in the last few years of Banjo-Kazooie. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the TAS, it's basically a program that'll play the game for you. So you give it a list of button presses you want it to press, and it'll press those buttons perfectly exactly when it's supposed to do it. So you can basically do stuff that's more precise than a human could ever do playing the game. So most TASs will just finish the game as fast as possible, but this one's going to show off a few really cool glitches that don't normally get shown in speedruns. The first one's right here, 50-note door skip. So that was something called a floating point clip or a big clip, and I'll explain a bit more about what that is after the next room. In this room we're going to see something called a teledive, which is basically when two water planes are right above each other. You can zip down to the lower one just by diving down. If you do that when you're out of bounds, it causes you to go off the edge of the map and void out. There's another glitch where you can get under the water just by shooting a bunch of eggs. That's the only spot in the game that I know of where that works, just because it's the slope down into the water helps it work properly. And another bit clip to get into Treasure Trove Cove. Now we're going into this level to show off a couple of different glitches. The first glitch is a skew glitch, which Banjo's model is going to get tilted. So that has something to do with the leaky cutscene. We're going to trigger the leaky cutscene and then swim underwater, but have Banjo facing downwards when the cutscene starts. So then the water's going to drain while Banjo's facing downwards like this. Now what happens there is Banjo never goes through the full process of exiting the water, which involves some angle correction. So he's still going to be facing a very funky angle here. So the main purpose of this glitch is just to show off some very strange looking animations here, where there are a few applications that we'll see shortly. I think the tree climbing is probably my favourite. Depending what angle you're facing when you do the glitch depends how skewed Banjo would be. This is pretty much as skewed as I can get him because he's basically horizontal. I couldn't get him to go upside down. Now here's an application of the glitch. So there's notes inside this lockup. We can collect them because Banjo's nose is going into the chest. So having the tilted model like that just messes with the collision detection and allows us to do that. Unfortunately, that does not work with loading zones, because if Banjo's nose touches a loading zone to another room, it doesn't teleport you through the loading zone. Banjo's actual coordinates have to hit the loading zone, but it does work for collecting things like jiggies and notes through walls that you're not normally supposed to. Okay, now this lockup has a bunch of eggs in it, and I'm going to show you that I have collected all the eggs in this lockup. There's actually an out of bounds egg just underneath this lockup here. Using another big clip to get underneath it, you should be able to see the egg very shortly. And there it is. And that's the only out of bounds item that I know of in BK so far. But yeah, I don't really know what it's doing under there because it sits well below all the other eggs. There's a few ways to get to that egg. You could use the bee to fly out of bounds, or you could use Banjo's flying to fly out of bounds with a beak bomb. But a bit clip was just the quickest way to show that off there. Now this nipper skip's a bit different to normal because usually there would be a cutscene, but we managed to avoid it by coming in from underneath. Inside Nipper, I'm going to collect a Jiggy, and that's going to set us up for a very important glitch later called the Jiggy despawn glitch. So I'm going to die with the Jiggy in my hand, and the game's going to be in a state where it's expecting us to do a Jiggy dance and have Kazooie swallow the Jiggy. When Kazooie swallows the Jiggy gets deleted from the object list, so it gets removed from the memory and the object disappears in-game. The game is still expecting us to do a Jiggy dance right now, and it's still got in memory it's pointing to that Jiggy object. But now that I'm in a completely different map with completely different objects, that isn't pointing to the Jiggy object anymore, that's pointing to something completely different. And we'll see the result of that Jiggy despawn glitch shortly. For now, we're on our way to Bubblegloop Swamp. We're going to do another bit clip to get in, and I should explain a little bit how the bit clips work. Basically, the floor in the game is made up of a bunch of triangles. And on the edges where the triangles join together, there are sometimes really, really small gaps in the floor. So here there's a small gap and we can ground pound straight through. The other big clips like I did near the 50 note door are a little bit more complicated, but normally you can just ground pound through and that's all you really need. We're going to see a few glitches in Bubblegloop Swamp, the first being a longer forwards backwards talent drop. So what's happening there, when you hit the ground with the correct amount of speed, it thinks Banjo's head is colliding with the ground, and it triggers a failsafe mechanism that zips Banjo to the edge of the nearest floor triangle. Now, it just so happens that the floor in Bubblegloop Swamp is made up of really big floor triangles, so when you zip to the nearest edge, it sends you all the way over to Flibbits. Now, that's not even the nearest edge, but the wall leading up to Flibbits, like the little slope, that stops you. Okay, and we're going to see the result of our Jiggy despawn glitch now. So keep your eye on the crocodile head in the background. And it's gone. So what's happening with that glitch is, as I said before, Banjo grabbed the Jiggy in Treasure Trove Cove, and the object pointer is pointing to that Jiggy that's supposed to be in his hand, but when we change the map to Bubblegloop Swamp, instead of pointing towards a Jiggy, it's pointing towards the crocodile head that should be here. When you grab the Jiggy, it tries to despawn that object, essentially. So the crocodile head gets despawned. Now, you can't just grab any old Jiggy and have it work. It has to be a Jiggy where you don't have a Jiggy dance, because if you get a normal Jiggy dance, then it sets the object to the correct object, which is the Jiggy in your hand at the start of that dance. So that's why I had to grab the wading boots there, because that allows Banjo to get the Jiggy without having a Jiggy dance. And that's also why you don't ever see despawns happening in speedruns. So we death warp on the Jiggy in Treasure Trove Cove, but the next Jiggy that we grab in Clankers in 100% speedrun is one that has a Jiggy dance with it. So that means that the despawn glitch doesn't happen, and that's why you don't see despawns in speedruns. Despawns can actually be really bad, because if the object doesn't point to a valid object in memory, it'll actually crash the game. So most times if you do a despawn glitch, you're going to crash the game. Fun fact about this Gobies lobby room, it actually runs at lower than a normal frame rate. So on NTSC it runs at 20 frames per second, whereas most rooms run at 30 frames per second. But we're playing on power for various things to do with the bit clip glitch. So one thing I'm going to show off in Gobies Valley is basically the level was put together not too well in some spots. So there are a lot of gaps everywhere, and if you move fast enough you can actually fall through the gaps, just like bit clips. So you'll see a gap here where the wall meets the ground. You can ground pound through this gap and get out of bounds, but you can also just beak bomb. Now, something I thought would be a fun idea for this exhibition is to get all the stop and swap items that we can get in the game. Now, usually you have to enter cheats to get the stop and swap items, that being the 6 coloured eggs and the ice key. But there are 2 of these items, so this one egg that I'm about to get now and the ice key, that you can actually get without cheats. All the other items get spawned in by the cheats. Even the one in the Mad Monster Mansion cellar doesn't get spawned until you use the cheat to open the cellar barrel door blocky thing. So it's very likely that this egg that I've just got there and the ice key will be the only stop and swap items we'll ever be able to get without cheats. But once again, you never know with this game. There are a couple of other ways to get that blue egg. I probably could have done a bit clip near the door, and you could also get out of bounds with the bee near the door and then use the bee to get the egg. Now, coming up is FP early. We're used to seeing the flight pad being used for FP early, and we clip through that slope to the right there. But unsurprisingly, we can use bit clips to get into FP without opening it. Now, the bit clips that I've been normally doing, you ground pound through. But the other ones, like what I used to skip the 50 note door, you can't ground pound through because you need to flutter out of bounds under the door and get back in. So those more complicated bit clips involve playing on PAL and getting a lag frame and doing a very specific jump with just enough speed to get through the floor on one frame. The reason that we ground pound for most bit clips is because ground pound just gives us enough speed to fall straight through. Okay, we have one minor glitch coming up here, which is getting the token inside this snowman. If you get hit by a snowball, it recoils you into the snowman and doesn't spit you back out till you hit the ground. So that token actually used to be in the TAS route back before bit clips were found, because tokens are very, very tight in any percent. We're going to do another one of the more complicated bit clips that I mentioned before. So we can't ground pound for this one because we need to get back in bounds behind Wazza. The reason that I pooped all the eggs there was to get a lag frame, because the lag frame gives you a little bit more speed that you can use to get through the floor. That and playing in PAL and doing a very specific jump are all needed to get those kind of big clips. This is one of them as well. So if I just ground pounded through, I'd fall out of bounds and die. You'll notice I did a bit clip there in the exact same spot, and that's just because that's where the gap is in the floor. There are quite a few gaps, but it's easy to just use the same one because I can. Now coming up is a pretty complicated glitch called cauldron cutscene overlap. Basically, in this game, if two cutscenes overlap, then Banjo can get warped to the map of one of the cutscenes. This is pretty rare to happen. The only case where I've found it happening is with cauldron cutscenes. So that's what we'll see now. I'm going to activate two cauldrons at the same time. You'll notice a side effect of this glitch is the music. If you swim above the water, you get music as if you're in front of Frazizi Peak. Now I hit the blue cauldron and the pink cauldron, activated both of those because they're basically above one another. And when the cutscenes overlap, I get sent to the blue cauldron map. If you hit the pink cauldron first somehow, you get sent to the pink cauldron map. And you'll notice that I didn't pop up next to the cauldron. I actually popped up right in front of Rusty Bucket Bay. And that's the default exit on the map. So pretty much the exit that it sends you to if it doesn't know like where to spawn Banjo in the map. What's really exciting about that glitch is if you did it on the cauldron next to the 810 note door, the exit there is in front of Dingpot, which would give you a free 810 skip and dog skip. Unfortunately, there's only one cauldron in Furnace Fun, so we can't actually do that overlap glitch, but it's a theory on how to get 810 skip, possibly in an RTA setting. Now here's Furnace Fun skip, TAS method. It's one of the weirder glitches in this game. The corners of these tiles have collision where you can jump on them. It's almost possible to get that in RTA, but it's not possible to make it all the way across the board. It's a bit too precise. Now we're going to see 810 skip with a bit clip. This is different to the original method that I found for 810 skip. This is much easier to TAS, but it's still not RTA viable. That one clip there saves about 20 minutes in an 80% TAS. Now I always used to wonder what was behind this door, so I figured I might as well show it off in this glitch exhibition. Turns out there's nothing. So if I were to fall off there, I would just fall into the void and die. But I imagine there's actually a path built behind that door for purposes of the cutscene. Where 2D's put into the beauty machine. Okay, we're going to do the grunty fight just to finish off the showcase. A lot of this will look fairly standard with RTA. The main difference is that I can actually have a lot more precision on my eggs with TAS tools. You'll notice that the movement during this TAS wasn't very precise. The reason for that is because I played the actual non-important movement by hand, and then I just did the really complicated tricks with TAS tools. just because it takes a very, very long time to TAS optimal movement in this game. Another thing that I did was for the bit clips, I used position hacks to get myself into the correct position. Everything you've seen in this showcase is theoretically possible, but I just used some extra external tools to make it a bit quicker to TAS, because I didn't really feel like optimizing 20 or so bit clips for this. We'll see a glitch in this fight here with double ground pound. So that has two purposes. It saves some feathers and it's a lot quicker than hitting her with beat bombs there. You can get one ground pound very easily in an RTA setting, but getting the second ground pound is pretty precise. It was quite difficult to TAS it as well. We're going to see Jinjo cutscene overlap here as well, which is something fairly standard that you'll see in RTA runs. But you can get to Talon Trot and get a pretty big jump off before the cutscene actually starts. And upcoming for these three Jinjo statues is some pretty unrealistic egg aim abilities. But that's the beauty of TASing. Now the Jinjos follow you above your head, so I can maneuver them so that all three of them hit Grunty at the same time. And that kind of puts her pretty far off of where she's supposed to be. She's supposed to land on top of that little pillar thing there. It's actually pretty precise getting her to land over here. The effects are pretty random and they're kind of weird. What you just saw in that cutscene there was me ground pounding before the cutscene started. The ground pound has one frame where Banjo goes up at a really fast speed and then he slams down really fast. But if you have that frame where he's going up when the cutscene starts, it carries his speed over. Now normally we'd end inputs early on a TAS, but I have some time to play around here. That sound that you're hearing during this cutscene is Banjo touching Grunty's shield, but he doesn't get hit away from the shield because his movement is locked in the cutscene. So she's just going to keep making that sound until the Jinjo hits her. It's actually pretty impressive that the game knows to have the Jinjo aim at Grunty here. I would expect it to have the Jinjo aim at the pillar where she's supposed to be, but there you go. And that'll be pretty much everything in this TAS exhibition. Thank you for watching. I'm really happy to be able to show off what's happened in the last few years. It's definitely come a long way since the published TAS. If you're interested in more Banjo science stuff, I have lots of videos, and I can also leave some links to other great Banjo scientists. Thanks for watching.